On June 13, 2020, after the nation's only physician serving as a state governor, Virginia's Governor Ralph Northam, had implemented a statewide mandate for non-medical grade facial coverings that he had assured Virginians would provide protection against a novel coronavirus, asserting as a doctor that even a bandana would work. The Washington Post, reviewing a recent study completed by the WHO, World Health Organization, a hasty review of 172 observational studies that had been completed after May 3, 2020, wrote that 4 months of discord about the coronavirus epidemic have transformed the cloth mask into a potent political symbol, touted by Democrats as a key part of communal responsibility, labeled by some GOP leaders as a sign of government overreach, and as a scarlet letter pinned on the week. A scarlet letter pinned on the week. And even that report that had been published under the encouraging headline announcing that a spate of new research supports wearing masks to control coronavirus spread had buried a proviso 4 paragraphs down, which many may not have read, conceding that conclusion came with an important caveat. We have low certainty in that, should have been said, meaning the authors cannot be strongly confident in the result, which is quite distinct from the headline, spate of new research supports wearing masks to control coronavirus spread. The results in that study, in fact, had concluded that 12 to 16 layer cotton surgical masks may not afford adequate protection against a novel coronavirus. And I doubt that many have seen anyone wearing more than 12 to 16 layer cotton surgical masks in a pandemic in which over 5 million people worldwide have died. And after the president's somber address on February 5th, noting the passing of another benchmark as the American death toll surpassed 900,000, beloved mothers and fathers, grandparents, children's brothers and sisters, neighbors and friends, just 4 days later on February 9th, ABC News had reported that it was politics back to usual, stating with the midterms 9 months away, Democrats are now joining the chorus of Republicans who say the nation must learn to live with the virus and are pressing Biden to chart a path forward. Brian Stryker, a partner at Impact Research, a Democratic polling firm, was quoted as stating, Democratic voters have run out of empathy for unvaccinated people dying of COVID, and stated firmly they are ready to live their lives. Apparently, the communal responsibility that had been the rallying cry of progressives throughout the pandemic has now run its course. On September 27, 2021, preparing a big push to have children over the age of 5 vaccinated, Ralph Northam had stated somberly, if you know that and you still don't want the shot, then I hope you give some thought to how your family will remember you. Adding, give some thought to what they'll do without you. Think about how you want your obituary to read, because you're taking a foolish, dangerous chance, and it affects many more people than just you. No longer talking about science, but more psychological suasion to convince you to become vaccinated. But now the new message appears to be a brinksmanship ultimatum. If conservatives refuse to be vaccinated, then it is their bodies and their choice, and let nature take its toll. And those who recall the beginning of the public health crisis in the Commonwealth of Virginia may not find this new message distinct from the report in the Washington Post on April 13, 2020, the same day that the Department of Defense had announced its very first fatality for an active duty service member, Aviation Ordnanceman Chief Petty Officer Charles Robert Thacker, Jr., age 41, of Fort Smith, Arkansas. One of over 1,400 persons who had been infected aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt, in actions for which the commander, Captain Brett Elliott Crozier, was cited in an Inspector General report in February 2021 for bad command judgment and held responsible for at least some of the infections that ensued after March 28th, when he had suspended social distancing aboard his vessel in the presence of what he had described as a highly contagious and lethal disease. Following that line of logic, Captain Crozier, responsible for his crew of almost 5,000 men aboard that warship, would be responsible for the death of that man. But he has not been held accountable for that. But on April 13th, when they had reported on the death of Bishop Gerald Glenn, age 66, the founder and leader since 1995 of the New Deliverance Evangelistic Church in Chesterfield, stated in the Washington Post, Glenn preached in church about the virus in March before he became sick, encouraging people not to be afraid. On March 22nd, 5 days after Virginia Governor Ralph Northam, D., as a Democrat, had urged people to avoid non-essential gatherings of more than 10 people, Glenn told his congregation that I firmly believe that God is larger than this dreaded virus, according to a video played April 6th by Richmond station WTBR. On March 23rd, Northam ordered non-essential businesses closed and banned all gatherings of more than 10 people, including this bishop's church, as non-essential. However, around the same time of the president's address to the nation about the over 900,000 American lives lost, which includes almost 20,000 veterans, 910 children, 92 soldiers, the very spine of America, who were residing in veterans care facilities where the doors to visitors had been closed on March 10th, 2020, the very first day of the WHO pandemic declaration. The fact checkers at Snopes had reported in February 2022, a number of conservative news outlets reported on a working paper entitled A Literature Review and Meta-Analysis of the Effects of Lockdowns on COVID-19 Mortality by a group of scholars at Johns Hopkins University. The paper claimed that the lockdowns implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic had little impact on preventing deaths. As this study appeared to run counter to previous reports that found lockdowns saved lives, we wanted to take a closer look at it. And their strongest argument during a public health crisis where the logical fallacy of authority has featured prominently, relying upon celebrity endorsements and claims of impeccable credentials, in claims like Fauci said, and not science. Rigorous examination of empirical and clinical facts was his study, which had also appeared in the Wall Street Journal, was not endorsed by Johns Hopkins University. While many media outlets presented this working paper as if it was a Johns Hopkins study, this report would be more accurately described as a non-peer-reviewed working paper by three economists, one of whom is an economics professor at Johns Hopkins University. Dr. Anthony Fauci has been repeatedly referred to as the nation's leading infectious disease control expert, which he is not. He is actually the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, which is responsible for funding research on medical technology, such as vaccines and masks. But very, very few people have, and nor has he, ever tried to clarify that distinction. But for a moment, putting aside the partisan divisions that even the Washington Post had noted in the beginning of the public health crisis, and even putting aside the enormous death toll that around the world has exceeded 5.7 million and which will inevitably exceed 6 million, the entire death toll of the Holocaust in a matter of just a week. Try to recall the cost of the lockdowns just to you. Everyone wants to focus away from the pandemic, so take a little time and just think about you. Immediately after the implementation of the sweeping lockdowns in the Commonwealth of Virginia on March 17, 2020, which actually began on March 15th with prohibitions against large gatherings that were non-essential, 100 or more, canceling all non-essential social gatherings involving 10 persons or more, the business leader had noted the fact that the unemployment claims had increased by tenfold, from around 4,000 to over 40,000. And one of those people who lost their monthly earnings may have been you. Axios had reflected around that time that the effect was like a Hurricane Katrina in every state. By July 2020, some 20% of compliant with government policy Christian churches had closed their doors permanently, never to open again. And over 50% of compliant with government policy minority businesses by August 2020 had been driven to financial ruin. And they are not coming back. And they may have been your business. They may have been your job. And they are now gone. Victims of a novel coronavirus. Even the business magazine Forbes has noted that the loss to children in development wrought by closures of schools will be felt for many, many decades, even a generation. And even in the community of Arlington, a community with the most government scientists, which boasts the rank of 14th in the nation for holders of graduate degrees, not even one child was afforded the opportunity to be administered the PSAT to compete for the National Merit Scholarship, in a year in which their chances had doubled to receive scholarship funding for a college education. A college education that only 50% of African American males, compared with 70% of other demographics, may even begin, and which only 13% survive to complete. Maybe that child was your child that missed that opportunity in fear that your child was going to die from a novel coronavirus. And so you locked down, even though the fact is that in the Commonwealth of Virginia, only 13 children have died from a novel coronavirus. Only 910 nationwide, only 23,000 worldwide. As the president stated soberly on the anniversary of the pandemic declaration by the World Health Organization, we've lost businesses and dreams we spent years building. We've lost time with each other. And our children have lost so much time with their friends, time with their schools. No graduation ceremonies this spring, no graduation from college, high school, moving up ceremonies. And all of this is attributable not to a novel coronavirus, but to lockdown policies. And long before even Democrats and progressives were ready to move on and get on with their lives, the president said at that time, the only way to get our lives back, to get our economy back on track, is to beat the virus. And the president said, we know what we need to do to beat the virus. Tell the truth. Tell the truth. Follow the sciences. The science. Work together. Put trust and faith in our government to fulfill its most important function, which is protecting the American people. No function more important. And so for a moment, let's take a look at the science, not in metadata analysis, not in stochastic and mathematical models, not in complicated theories, but in simple case study examination, which for one reason or another has not been even discussed by the government or in the press. And it involves those persons who the president had described on Veterans Day, standing before the tomb of the unknown soldier in Arlington National Cemetery as the very spine of America. A day upon which he did not even make mention of the fact that by that date, over 16,000 veterans, primarily veterans of color, and with a median age of 70 had died while in the care of government public health officials in veteran care facilities, and had in fact started to double the rate of fatalities beginning the month before in October. And perhaps this example will inform you as to whether or not lockdowns were effective or not. According to the official timeline published by the Veterans Administration, VA stopped allowing visitors to enter its 134 nursing homes and 24 major spinal cord injury and disorder centers on March 10th, 2020, at the very beginning of the pandemic. So under the theory, no persons except medical staff and administrators in those facilities could have introduced this reportedly highly contagious disease into the hospital settings. How did this occur? However, as of February 12, 2022, there have been 19,880 fatalities. The only official statements from the Veterans Administration to date have stated that the veterans were old and probably would have died anyway, which is simply unacceptable. And that according to marketing surveys conducted with the family and friends, they had received high marks in terminal care in this customer satisfaction survey, which is simply deplorable for anyone who needs to consider how they want their obituary to read. It is unfathomable that over the course of 2 years, 20,000 people might die in a hospital with no competent public health professional wondering how this is occurring, where the doors had been closed to keep the infection out. According to the Snopes fact checkers, who are aware of these facts, they have only presented a story regarding the lockdown study that had been promoted by conservatives and also the Wall Street Journal. And that study had stated specifically that the World Health Organization writing group in 2006 had concluded that lockdowns and shelter-in-place orders were not recommended, specifically concluding that forced isolation and quarantine are ineffective and impracticable. Findings that had informed their recommendations in the largest sample size tracer contact study before the lockdowns in the Commonwealth. Almost 56,000 laboratory confirmed cases in China, completed in February 2020 and forming the basis of our litigation challenge that was brought in April 2020, for which an amended petition for certiorari to the Supreme Court had been filed on the very same day of the President's address regarding reaching the benchmark of 900,000 fatalities in America. Litigation that has not ever been mentioned anywhere in the press, not even in the former State Attorney General Mark Herring's press release in which he had boasted in August 2020 of his defense of the Virginia governor's response to the public health crisis. So at a minimum, the state government that had locked down the state and also the press reporting on it had not been entirely forthcoming with you, because there is litigation that has gone all the way to the Supreme Court and not one story has been written about it. And according to the Snopes fact checkers, they have claimed that about the recent study on lockdowns that a number of researchers have also taken issue with the methods used in this study, as may well be the case, but they did not even take the time to raise those specific objections for any argument on the merits. So the bottom line is this: you look like an intelligent person. And if lockdowns were effective and the doors to veterans care facilities had been closed to visitors on March 10, 2020, New Jersey Senator Cory Booker, while running for president, would have no reason on June 20th, 2020 to raise an alarm about fatalities in the veteran care facilities in East Orange, something about which he suddenly became silent about after that point. If lockdowns were effective and the doors to veteran care facilities had been closed to visitors on March 10, 2020, there would not be 16,000 fatalities for the president to forget in his Veterans Day speech in Arlington Cemetery. If lockdowns were effective and the doors to veteran care facilities had been closed to visitors on March 10, 2020, today there would not be almost 20,000 veterans inside those facilities who had succumbed to COVID-19. 25% more than were dead on Veterans Day. Nor would there be, as of today, 595,012 cases of infection associated with those veteran care facilities. According to their website, commitment, advocacy, respect, and excellence are their core values. A theme we hear often in our schools, our public schools, core values. But commitment, advocacy, respect, excellence, care. These are the core values of the Veterans Administration. And according to their mission statement, their mission is to fulfill President Lincoln's promise to care for him who shall have borne the battle for his widow and his orphan by serving and honoring the men and women who are America's veterans. The very men and women who the president had called the very spine of America in Arlington Cemetery on Veterans Day, standing before the tomb of the unknown soldier to have a photo opportunity while laying a wreath, symbolically, in thanks for the 16,000 veterans who had died in veteran care facilities by that date, but about which he made not even one mention of their passing, in thanks for their service. It is just something to think about as the president discharges those service members and leaders who have refused the vaccine, and for those soldiers who have now been deployed and may well join those deployed to Europe during the crisis currently in the Ukrainian border. I believe the president had said something about doing a patriotic duty, but he has said absolutely nothing about these men and women who have sacrificed for our freedoms as veterans, and who have taken an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Now tell me what a patriot is. You look like an intelligent person. This briefing is unclassified. Until next time, you have the right to remain silent, as you were. My name is Major Mike Webb. By God, I am running for U.S. Congress. Next year, make the right choice, and we shall make America great again. Honest. And y'all come back now. Go. Carry on. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.